Which book is considered a literary masterpiece but you didn't like it at all? The Scarlet Letter. What's really interesting to me is how many of the books people are listing are the books we've had to read. At this point, the top 10 or so top-level comments are all books I had to read for various English classes. I wonder how much of that has to do with it the inherent dislike of the books, because we never chose to read them. Great Expectations. It was long and overdrawn for a story that I didn't find compelling. Also, while reading it, it was pretty obvious that Dickens was paid by the word when writing it. War and Peace. Honestly, I've never felt so disconnected from a reading in my entire life, and that is counting the back of shampoo bottles. Can't bring myself to give a shit about any of the characters even if Tolstoy himself got out of the grave and said, "Hey man, can you give it a try?" Shakespeare counts, right? Romeo and Juliet. I love Shakespeare. I love Macbeth, Hamlet, Twelfth Night, Julius Caesar, Merchant of Venice, etc. But Romeo and Juliet is a pointless story about incredibly stupid people. Romeo and Juliet was an absolute nightmare to get through on the account that we read the entire thing aloud in class and the teacher corrected every single little mispronunciation. Given we'd never read old-timey English before, it took us about twice as long as it should have. Moby Dick. Because there was not enough dick. Catcher in the Rye. It is the most pretentious, self-important shite I've ever read. And I was once stuck on an island for 4 days with only Battlefield Earth to read. The Alchemist, by Paulo Coelho. Some fuckwad who believes in dreams and fairy tales wanders in the desert to find himself. What was the point of that book, or why people like it? I'll never understand. Wuthering Heights. Heart of Freaking Darkness. For such a short novel, man, it was a struggle to read. The Great Gatsby. Great Expectations by Dickens. Pretty ironic that I had such high hopes. I thought Atlas Shrugged was cartoonish. The characters were so over the top it bordered on parody. The Fountainhead was the better book in every respect. On the Road by Jack Kerouac. The Beat Generation can shove it up their ass. Fahrenheit 451. I felt like the whole book was some sort of Reddit edgy meme. Everyone circle-jerking about how good it was but felt like a big-in joke about how we read books, not like those brainwashed tools. Spoilers, when the main character goes off the wall and murders his boss and starts his run from the law, I thought the book was just starting to go somewhere until it abruptly ended. The novel I purchased has tons of essays and opinion pieces printed after the story, so when the book just ended I thought I had another 100 pages to go and was confused. Dracula. It's not a completely terrible book, it was just not what I was expecting and left me a bit disappointed. I was really excited to read it for a class in high school, but did not expect it to be in the format of journal entries. It just wasn't a style I particularly enjoyed. I can totally understand why it became such a classic though. It was almost like the Blair Witch Project of its time, like found footage in a way. 3 times I have tried to tackle Infinite Jest, and 3 times I have been stymied. I can read immense, dry tomes and make my way through just fine, but for some reason I always peter out about halfway through this bad boy. I know people who love it. I know I probably should love it. I'll probably give it one more try in 10 years and then set my copy on fire. Ulysses. I know a lot of it is cultural stuff that made sense back in the early 20th century when Joyce wrote it, and that if I tried to understand it's a masterpiece, but I just can't get into it. No Ethan Frome? I think I had to read this in 8th grade. I probably loved reading more than most, but this was the book one remember most as a chore. The whole thing was a boring slog to get through, from the writing style to the melodramatic plot. I almost never participated in discussions in class, but I vividly remember going off on the teacher about how much I disliked reading it. I've tried to read Catch-22 for years. I tried reading the book, watching the movie, and I've tried the audiobook, and I have yet to get through any of them successfully. I just can't. It's just too obtuse for me, I guess. Edit, based on all the passion here and the insistence on patience with the narrative, I'm going to give it another go and see it all the way through. The Awakening by Kate Chopin. It was really well written, but oh my god, every single character was so unbelievably obnoxious and selfish that I hated reading every second of it. The Lord of the Rings. Those books go on forever. I'm shocked they were able to boil it down to just 3 movies. This will be unpopular, but Game of Thrones. Everybody loves it so much and I just could not get more than about 40 pages into the first book. I've read a lot of shit that doesn't even qualify as writing, but the writing style in GOT was the worst. Silas Marner. Jesus fuck me with a cactus, Christ, that was a dull read. Maybe it's not as much a classic as others on this list, but I consider this book the point I started losing interest in A levels. Like and subscribe to support this bot and its future development.